Once again, we start in about 10 minutes time. Thank you.
She put you on the spot. She put you on the spot. Oh yeah, that's the correct answer.
Three.
Easy does.
Seven on me.
So it's always going to be a few around.
So different.
Oh no.
All different, yeah, all very different. No.
That's why I printed that.
Yeah, it was my favorite experience, but yeah. I almost majored in history, but then I changed last minute. Yeah. Yeah. But she's still always doing work with the university. But yeah. Long time ago.
the speaker say to everybody, let's take your seats on the stage.
I'm a very
It's maximum.
Because I mean, thankfully, I'm very concentrated and I have the reconciliation so I go out. So I know section 20. I will go back to my house, my channel, section 20, you know, mass
Check 1, 2, 2, 1, 3.
Itu dah paling tinggi dah. Paling max dah.
Check 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, check 1, 2.
Very soft.
I think everywhere I need.
Check 1, 2, 2, 1, 2.
It's maximum.
Something wrong. It cannot be. Very, something wrong. It should be louder than that.
But this is the maximum. Try.
Try again.
Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Working. Test 1, 2.
But I can hear it.
Good morning, everyone. We're about to start. Can I invite the speakers to please come and take a seat on stage? Dr. Kwan. Okay, hope everyone can hear me. The microphone is a little soft today. Am I audible in the back? Yes. Okay, fantastic. I believe we're streaming this live on Gerak Budaya's Facebook and YouTube. So I just want to make sure that that's live. I believe we are. Anyway, apologies for a slightly late start. Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for being here and welcome to Gerak Budaya. My name is Daniel Anthony. I am Theressa Lim's oldest son and I'll be your Master of Ceremonies for today. 9 months ago today, Lim Chin Chin uttered her final words. She told me and my father, "Go to sleep. If you don't go to sleep, I cannot go to sleep." Those were her last words. And 2 days later, she drew her final breath. And Malaysia had lost one of its unsung fighters. But losing a fighter does not mean losing a fight. Just as one fallen soldier does not mark the end of a battle. Today we are gathered for the launch of Theressa Lim Chin Chin, Liberation Theology, Operation Lalang, and the Price of Pursuing Justice. Please take that in context, we're not here to launch Operation Lalang. This book is written in part by Chin Chin herself as she recalled the harrowing memories of her detention under Operation Lalang. Now some may argue that these dark chapters of Malaysian history are wounds that should be left in the past. They should be closed, never to be reopened. But we also know what happens to wounds that are left untreated. They will begin to fester. In her living days, Chin Chin did tell us about the time of her detention. I'm sure she told many of us about it as well. And some of the experiences that she had. But the more gruesome, dark details, including the torture she endured, were kept to herself. And after reading this book, I now understand why better. Now that Chin Chin is at peace, let's not pretend that the haunting memories also vanished along with her final heartbeat. There are so many lessons to be learned from her story. Many struggles that are still ongoing to this day that should not be lost to time, and many more who are still not free out there longing for justice. Sometimes we see injustice as this distant villain, this abstract tragedy that only affects lands far away, like Myanmar or Palestine. It's actually a curse disguised as a blessing when the powers that be can sweep injustice in a nation under the rug to make things seem all right to most of us, creating a complacent society that's willing to look the other way. That's why it is especially valuable that we have this book out right at this present moment. A book that details what it means and what it is like to have been subject to political oppression, in light of the recent decision by the Malaysian Home Ministry to ban 2 books by Gerak Budaya's SIRD imprint under the Printing Presses and Publications Act 1984, which are Memoir Syamsiah Fakih dari Awas ke Regimen ke-10 and Komrad Asih Regimen 10 dalam Denyut Nihilisme Sejarah. In this rush of social media that we experience today, where attention spans are counted in seconds, a book almost feels out of place, maybe even difficult to launch. But Chin Chin's story is not something that can be told in a TikTok post or a tweet. It is not something that can be summarized in a bunch of blog posts, nor can it be condensed into a few paragraphs by ChatGPT. This is why Gerak Budaya's journey in the Malaysian political landscape is an imperative one. So to begin today's event, please turn your attention to the screen for a short video presentation. I think the projector's not on yet. Test 1, 2. All right. Great. Thank you very much for that video presentation. And without further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker today, Professor Terence Edmund Gomez, a close friend of Yuan Chin.
Thank you. I was told last night that I have only 10 minutes. I had a much longer presentation because there's so much that we can talk about when we discuss the life and times of Chin Chin. Since I've only 10 minutes, I'm not going to speak much about issues such as the impact of neoliberalism, and even the case of liberation theology. I'm not going to get it. I don't have the time for it. But the themes of the book are important. Liberation theology, ISA detention, and Chin person. Three themes. As far as the ISA is concerned, I will leave it to Kwok Yao Song. Who better can speak about the ISA than Kwok? What I'm going to give you is my personal reflection. I'm going to try and interpret the book from my eyes. You may not agree with me, but this is my interpretation. First, I want to commend Dave. I remember when, soon after Chin's passing, we were having a meal, and I told Dave, you know, it'd be good to capture Chin's life. I called her an unsung hero, and it's very important that her story be told. And I must say, I'm impressed that Dave has managed to crack on with the book before on the final farewell to Chin tomorrow. This is without a doubt a captivating read. It's inspiring when you read about her life and lived experience. What is important about the book is that it captures her life in defining moments in Malaysian history. The defining moments in Malaysian history, specifically the period 1987, when we saw the arrest of the ISA, but there are also defining moments in global history, including changes in the world economy which had an impact in Malaysia. But let me go back to her early life, 1970s. Her young life in Ipoh. Soon after this period, after 1969, we saw a change in economic policies, and we saw the rapid industrialization of Malaysia. Powerful multinational companies were investing in the country. The idea was simple: growth at all costs. And I'm going to use words which are also being used today, so you can see how history, the playbook of the 1970s, 1980s, is the same playbook we are seeing today. It's also to show you how we have not learned from our history. The leaders of today have not learned. Not to be surprised, because those leaders of yesteryear are also in power today. In the 1970s, when multinational companies came in a big way, yes, the economy grew. but it came at great expense to the workers. And what is very exciting about the book is to see the exploitation of labor through her eyes when these companies came in. And that inspired her. Being exposed to this gross exploitation of these people was what motivated her to act. But there was another significant moment in her life at that time. The church, the PHCC, the Perpetual Health Communication Center, where Dave was also a part of, and later the National Office of Human Development, based in Kuala Lumpur. And she worked for both. And through the church-based organizations which had a very strong social orientation, it motivated her even further to act against oppression. But the 1970s was also another exciting thing was happening globally. The rise of liberation theology, the key theme in this book. And Chin lived in a time when she saw the rise of this new theology, which was also inspirational because it called out exploitative economic system, and it called out oppressive regimes. And it called on Christians to act in the pursuit of justice. And this is what really inspired her also in terms of being exposed to a theology, a Catholic theology, which gave meaning to her life and to her struggle. And if you read the book carefully, you will see that these things come true. It's not stated explicitly, but you can interpret it. You can see it in her life and how it shaped her. But something else happened in the 1980s. She went to the Philippines. Again, here we are dealing with another epochal moment in her life. The Philippines. At that time in the Philippines, it was Marcos. Remember Ferdinand Marcos Sr., the oppression that he was causing in that part of the world. And she went and she was doing her master's in the Philippines. And not only was she studying about liberation theology, she was also seeing the impact of how the Filipinos were using liberation theology to inspire them to stand up against a very oppressive regime. What an experience. And I'm sure it shaped her. And what is also very clear is that it probably motivated her also in a way that if the Filipinos can overthrow Marcos, why can't we do it here in Malaysia? And here, she says it, it's in her book. She said what inspired her was, as she puts it, and I quote, freedom from fear, which led them to act. Freedom from fear. That's an important point. Because we hear it all the time. I'm fearful if I speak up, what will happen to me? Don't you all hear it all the time? And that fear now, because of that fear, we keep quiet. Better to keep quiet. Don't get yourself into trouble. And this is what is inspiring about the book. It tells us we must overcome fear. Otherwise, don't expect change. There's another moment in her life which I must talk about, the 1980s. Epochal change, 1981, and she draws attention to it. Two things happened in the 1980s. First, for all the inspiration that she got from seeing the impact of liberation theology and how it brought about change, the 1980s, something happened. Two things happened. First, Pope John Paul II became Pope. And she saw how John Paul then suppressed this vibrant theology, killed it off. She had seen what had happened in Nicaragua and how he went and disciplined the priests who had brought about change in Nicaragua and said, priests should not be involved in politics. How uninspiring a figure he was. And what did that do to her? Then we have the case of Reagan and Thatcher rising. And the kind of economic vision they espoused was something which even Pope John Paul adhered to. The coming together of state and church in a common vision, which eventually brought about enormous damage to the world, especially to workers. And she witnessed it. And I can't help but imagine or think about as she witnessed this, what was this doing to Chin? In her mind, when she saw what state and church in collusion, the damage they were the damage they were doing through their understanding of development to the world. But in 1981, something else happened domestically. The rise of Mahathir Mohamad. And when Mahathir Mohamad came to power, and I'm sure the older folk here will remember this, not the younger ones, he promised us, bersih, cekap, amanah, clean, efficient, trustworthy government. I am going to eradicate corruption. He also said something else which is important. He said, look east, let's take on the British, buy British last. And he was a student activist who had challenged the British when he was in the university, spoke up against oppression by the British. And now he had come to power. And I still remember that time, how many of us were very inspired by that, as change finally come. But unfortunately, things fell apart very quickly. And we saw it. And within a quick period of less than five years, the great divisions within UMNO, which ultimately culminated in the 1987 ISA arrest. Political elites feud, we suffer. Innocent people go into jail, including Chin Chin, and may I add, Theressa. Another, in my mind, a great Malaysian hero. So when you read this book, what lessons do we learn? What do we take away from this? Especially in the context of the current times too. The state. The difference between the rhetoric of the state and the reality of what they do. The state today, similar to Mahathir, reformasi, change, and the reality of what we are seeing. For example, including, you just heard Daniel talking about banning books. And now, more interestingly, for all the rhetoric about being an opponent of corruption, we are hearing about a corporate mafia which implicates political leaders, for which the government refuses to act. Similar, what you see in the book and you read in Chin's book, you see it being played out today. And how do we make sense of this? And what would we, if we were like Chin, how would we act? Freedom from fear? Do we have her freedom from fear? Her account of the ISA, this is probably the most harrowing part of the book. If you read that book and you see what she went through the ISA, it is a very difficult read. What did the state do to her? What the tools of the state, the police, what did they do to this fine person, our friend, Chin? And then we look at the modern times too. What are the tools of the state now that they use to silence critics? Those are questions we have to ask. Let's go on to the church. This is my interpretation. I'm sure there are many Christians here, Catholics too, who may be very, discomforted by what I'm saying. But you read it, and interpret it for yourselves. You don't have to take my word for it. I'm entitled to my opinion. But this is now my opinion of reading Chin's account of the church. An institution to which she gave her life. An institution through which she mounted her struggle. But when the time came, in 1987, when the clampdown came, the church came. There were a few individuals who were good. Archbishop Sota Fernandez, I must put him up there as one person who stood up. But generally, the church came. And the institution she worked for, when she came out, abandoned her. And if you read that segment of the book, it's very troubling. This is an institution that talks about justice. What have they done? This was the institution that gave us liberation theology. And when the time came, they abandoned liberation theology and they abandoned those who were pursuing justice. That is the interpretation you get from reading this book. That is the interpretation you cannot run away from when you read her own words about the sense of abandonment that she felt by the institution that was supposed to protect her too. So there's much in this book that we can take away from. An oppressive state, a cowardly church, a church that has abandoned the principles to which one subscribed to. So how does this then affect us, especially our young, the children, her children? How do they deal with all this, exposed to all these injustices? The institutions that are supposed to protect us, the institutions that are supposed to be we look to for guidance, do this? As I said, this is my interpretation of her words and what she and Dave went through. Her faith was shaken. She questioned her faith. That is what the state had done to her. In the end, and this is the part which, when you read it, you think, what did she left? So she joined the corporate world. And she herself says, when she joined the corporate world, she entered and it became an unsettled, I'm quoting her, an unsettled space for her. The dilemmas she went through, dealing with the abandonment of the church and working now in the corporate sector. So I close with this, as much as it's inspiring, it is also a harrowing read. It is also a book which will compel us to think about ourselves and about the kind of life that we are leading. It will compel us to ask ourselves about the fears that we have to stand up against injustices. And I think the book has come out at a very good time. This is a very good time to read this book. The government has failed us. The injustices that we are seeing under this government that promised us reformasi is not a rhetoric, it's different from the reality. And confronted as we are with this reality and with the life of Chin Chin, and when we read it, how do we think about ourselves and how we will act? I hope you all will read the book. I can tell you it's a difficult read, but I think it's a book we all should read carefully, interpret it for ourselves, and put it in the context of the current day. And I hope we will make Chin proud by acting like how she did.
Before we move on to our next speaker, unfortunately, we have an obstruction downstairs, not one of Justice, but one of the car park. The red Honda City with the license plate WD8426B. Please relocate your vehicle. Thank you. Our second speaker for today is Dr. Kwok Kia Song, fellow ISA detainee in Chin during Operation Nala, who prefers to be addressed just as Song.
The family of Chin Chin, friends and friends. There's a picture of Chin Chin and what Jigong to her. But let's go this way. I've waited a long time for this book. When I first published my book in 1989, I said it's very important for every detainee to publish their experiences of Operation Nala. Because only through, I agree completely with what Theressa has said, but the other aspect of it is, unless we know what everybody experienced during Operation Nala, we will never know what the state, the deep state, and all the special branch operatives are all the operatives of the state. We will never know how the state thinks, the way in which perpetrate that torture to us, that is the way the state thinks. The information that they want from us, that is the way the state thinks. So I'm very happy and very glad to see this book by Chin Chin. Operation Lang is nearly, nearly 40 years now. And at the time, I tried to frame Operation Lang in a way that I thought was important. I called it a turning point in Malaysian history. It was a turning point, not only in the way in which the state criminalized dissent, not in the way in which they drew the line at where freedom had been, but in the way in which they brutally assaulted the judiciary. They brutally assaulted the judiciary not only in this country, but nowhere in the whole of the Commonwealth had the judiciary been abused in this way. And that is what is crucial, what is so brutal about Operation Lang. At the time, the Tunku, the old Tunku said that Malaysia was a police state. Remember what it was like under Operation Lang? It's quite interesting because yesterday, browsing through the headlines, I saw Hassan Karim saying, "How dare the police arrest a critic of the government? We are not a police state." So that's interesting, isn't it? That after all these years, we have the same police state being done. And what about since Operation Lang, the enforced disappearance of people like Pastor Ko, Che, Amri, people like that. That never happened before Operation Lang. So this is what we're dealing with today. And but today is not just a day to remember history. It's a day to honor Chin Chin. The years that she suffered. And Daniel and others disagree with me. What Daniel always says, I insist that the trauma that she experienced during Operation Lang, during the solitary confinement, that trauma lives in your body. That trauma lives in your mind. And that trauma lives in all the struggles that we do against oppression. And so this thing about the solitary confinement, I think, is very well elucidated in Chin Chin's book. You get an idea of what it's like. Spend hours talking about that, pacing up and down your cell for 60 days. You know? Right? In most cases, 61 days that made a mistake. And actually looking through the web recently, I discovered that in 2020, there was an international symposium at the Thomas Jefferson University in America. Thomas Jefferson University on solitary confinement. And their conclusion was that the torture under solitary confinement is not a torture. And that the trauma that you experience during solitary confinement, the days of solitary torture is what it is. And the United Nations has also identified that any kind of solitary confinement beyond 15 days is torture. If you remember in 1978, when Britain was brought before the European Court of Human Rights because they had kept Irish prisoners, Irish political prisoners for longer than 7 days, I think it was 9 days. And the European Court of Human Rights found Britain guilty of violating Human Rights Act, Convention of the United Nations. And also, we mustn't forget that we look at what Chin Chin is writing about. That ISA that came in 1960 actually was a supersession of the 1948 emergency regulations of the British colonialism. It was just a continuation of that. And Americans came to learn from British colonialism about how to deal with Viet Cong in Vietnam. And since then, the Americans have been learning it in Guantanamo Bay, they're learning it in Gaza, they've been learning it in Israel, they've been learning it in Lebanon. The same kind of torture. And so, the thing to bear in mind is that Operation Lang wasn't about national security. Can you imagine Chin Chin being a threat to national security? Can you imagine me being a threat to national security? I couldn't, yeah, but could Chin Chin hurt a fly? No, you couldn't. And so it was very cynical. Everybody see it. The Tungu could see it. And it was very cynical. And Sharon is the best person to talk about the Amor struggle during this time between Team A and Team B. It was a struggle mainly because of the Team B probably being let out of the spoils of Mahathir's privatization and the crony capitalism as well researched by parents. And the split in North between Team A and Team B is actually because of that. And we must get in the 80s, why was there such a big surge of civil society, NGO activists? Well, you remember pre-Operation Lam, you will know that the activism during that time was much, much more active than it was post-Operation Lam. Many people disappeared after Operation Lam. And that crony capitalism, which is today we see as the swinging doors of revenge prosecution, which still is interesting that the crony capitalism of that time is still being played out today, even though Dayang Zainuddin is gone. You know, he's still going on his wife, his children. Mahathir and his children is still being so we have to wait for the next round when Anwar goes on the other side of the swing door. The same revenge prosecution will come back again. So, but it was that privatization, it was the way in which neoliberal capitalism had been inflicted on the country that we saw contradictions at the time, not only amongst the working class, not only amongst the peasantry, but also among the commodity producers, amongst the small, medium enterprises. That is why the 80s was such a vibrant state of kind of revolt. And I've said that I seem to see it every decade that Operation Lalang colonized says, Mahathir must apologize. Today he's still alive, enjoying his 100th year. But today we must also ask Anwar Ibrahim to apologize. Because Anwar Ibrahim was complicit in Operation Lalang. He was the education minister. He was the one that sent those unqualified administrators to the Chinese schools. Could have been easily annulled, could have been easily rescinded, and the Chinese schools would have quieted down, but it did not. It allowed UMNO youth. It gave UMNO youth an excuse to call for a rally 500,000. In fact, when I was detained on the ISA, they were saying that I was part of this thing. But actually what I was doing during that time was I was working at the China Assembly Hall and I was pasting tape over the windows of Chinese Assembly Hall, because we know that when 500,000 UMNO youth rally in Stadium Negara, they're going to spill all over and they're going to see Chinese Assembly Hall and they're going to throw rock boxes at Chinese Assembly Hall. And so I wasn't actually in the Tian Ho. But today, Mahathir can plead wisdom. You know, he's working in another hospital. But Anwar can't. Anwar has had a moral responsibility as a leader to recognize that. Today is important. It's important. Malaysia remembers, not only remembers the people who paid their price in their lives through Operation Line, but we remember people like Lim Chin Chin. And we want a Malaysia that remembers. Remembers not just Lim Chin Chin, remembers Samsia Fakir, remembers Awasi and others. And I wouldn't say much more. Reading the book, you can't help notice that in the last analysis is a love story between David and Chin Chin. The poor darlings who only married 3 months before Chin Chin was arrested. You think of that? And so they didn't have no time for love. That was the anthem of I used to sing with Anizam, no time for love. No time for love if they come in the morning. No time to show fear of what tears in the morning. No time to ask why, no time for goodbyes, and the wail of the children is the cry of me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kwa. Oh, sorry, not to be nice. So I need to make mental note of that. Yes, one of the great things about this book and why it exists in its current media is that you actually read parallel storylines. It's not just the account of what my mother Chin Chin felt behind bars, also the chaos that happened outside of the prison, the harrowing experience that my father, Dave Anthony, had to go through. And this is where you will be able to see, where the information is placed side by side, how manipulative it was, how different truths were presented, both from behind bars and out in Greater Malaysia, where Mum was unable to see what was being done, what was being told to others about her. I'd like to invite our next speaker, Dr. Mary Cardosa, a medical doctor and longtime friend of Chin Chin, known by her friends as Chan.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks, Dave and Daniel, for asking me to do this. Actually, I don't know whether I should thank you because I don't really know why I am here speaking about Chin Chin. Yes, I was her friend. She had many, many friends. Yes, I was with her in the women's movement. There were many, many other women who were with Chin Chin in the women's movement. So anyway, I am going to talk about her. I guess that the only different thing about me was I'm a doctor. And I also know a little bit about her medical issues. So I was asked to talk about her involvement with the women's movement and her medical challenges. And that's what I will focus on. So I won't be talking about all the things that, her political activism, but I think her activism with feminism and her involvement with the women's movement was just as important as her other work for social justice, because this was also part of the fight for social justice. Chin Chin was a founder member of the Women's Development Collective, which was a small group of women who were part of I have to shorten everything, right? Because 10 minutes only. So WDC was part of the Joint Action Group Against Violence Against Women, and in 1985 was the first time when these issues of violence against women were brought into the public domain, discussed publicly. Okay, so domestic violence, rape, prostitution. At that time we talked about prostitution, we talked about portrayal of women in the media, we talked about sexual harassment. All these things were things that people didn't talk about. Women experienced, men experienced it as well, but nobody talked about it. So this was, Chin Chin was part of this movement. And I don't have to, I think a lot of people here know what Awam was all about and what Awam continues to do. WDC has disbanded since, because it was a smaller group of women, but I must mention Chi Hing Ling, Cecilia Ng, Irene Fernandez. A lot of these women were part of this early movement and continued to work through the years with Chin Chin as well. I just want to say a couple of things about Chin Chin's involvement with the women's movement. I think that she, even if after Operation Lalam, she actually worked for Awam under WDC, had some funding
and paid her to work for Awam because, as you heard just now, the church didn't want her anymore. So she worked for Awam, and but then subsequently, even when she went to work in the corporate sector, like you heard just now, she also continued to volunteer for Awam. So she was always with Awam and with WDC involved in this work of advocacy and doing a lot of training and other work to raise awareness about all the issues related to violence against women. Chin Chin, a couple of things she did in Awam, although Awam is more known for our work with regard to violence against women, we also started discussions which we call PER, politicization of ethnicity and religion, and Chin Chin was one of the movers of this. I think this is something that's different that maybe people don't know, and I'm not sure whether it continues in Awam till today because I am not really active in Awam anymore. Apart from working for Awam for a while, Chin Chin was also a treasurer for Awam for a few years during as a volunteer. For the Women's Movement for Awam and WDC, we called Chin Chin our moral compass. We would go to her whenever we had difficult decisions, when we didn't know, what was the correct thing to do. So to quote Heng Ling, she was the first among equals. She had clarity and steadfastness, and she had perseverance. She was a moral compass when we had to make difficult decisions. She always knew what was right, and she knew what was wrong. And she wasn't afraid to point out what was wrong when we did, when we went a little bit astray. So Chin was always there to lead us and to guide us, to keep us on the straight and narrow. And she did all this while facing many medical issues. So the medical issues are something that maybe I can talk about a little bit more. Not much in the book except for the long list. You see, the list actually covers 2 pages in the book. The list of medical challenges. Started with diabetes, which she had when she was carrying Daniel. And there's something called gestational diabetes, which, can go away after you deliver. But in Chin's case, it didn't go away. The diabetes stayed with her. And her diabetes wasn't, 25% of Malaysians have diabetes, but Chin Chin was one of adult Malaysians, sorry. Yitan was reacting to that. Chin Chin's diabetes was not so easy to control, not straightforward. First, she was diagnosed as, if you read the book, type 2 diabetes, which is usually treated with diet control and pills. Then she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which needs insulin. And then she was diagnosed as type 1.5, which is actually autoimmune. That there's the term LADA. Wait, I must also look at it. LADA, which is latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. Okay, so that's type 1.5 diabetes. Anyway, the short story is that her diabetes was difficult to control, and in the end, she had to take control herself. So she managed to get a pump, which gave her continuous infusion of insulin, because when she was injecting intermittent, sometimes she would just go doing. When she was within a group of people, suddenly she would just go doing like that because of hypoglycemia. But anyway, she managed to get this pump, and she managed to control. And after that, after she had the pump and she had the control, it was fine. So diabetes was one. Then she started having pain. She had pain in her hands and her feet, and she had this thing called Raynaud's phenomenon. Her fingers would turn blue when she was exposed to cold, all that. There's a little bit of it in the book as well. And it was painful. When your fingers turn blue, it's not just blue color, it's painful. So she went to many doctors. She couldn't get a diagnosis of what was wrong with her. Finally, after seeing many doctors, she ended up with a neurologist, Professor Gore in UM, who diagnosed her to have neuromyotonia. I have to look here because, it's not, all these are not common conditions. So neuro is nerves, myo is muscle. So So it affected, it's a condition, autoimmune condition. Autoimmune means your body is attacking its own cells, lah, okay? So the treatment is actually steroids, which we all know, everybody knows that steroids is not good for you, right? And long-term steroids actually has lots of complications. So steroids is, if your body is attacking yourself, you have to give steroids because you want to suppress your immune, you know. But then if you suppress it, then there are other issues that come about. Anyway, it's too complicated. But anyway, so it affected both her nerves as well as her muscles. So she had pain because of the how the nerves were affected, and she also had weakness. So she had, you know, she had like assault from many different, and then on top of all this, she also had other diagnoses, myasthenia gravis, rheumatoid arthritis, all of which are a spectrum of autoimmune conditions actually. But eventually, she also had visual impairment. Visual impairment from two things, not from one, but from two. One is a congenital condition called retinitis pigmentosa, which can cause blindness in the long run. And the other one was unfortunately from a complication of a cataract operation. So she, you know, she was weak, she had pain, and she also became blind, you know. Can you imagine all that? But Chin Chin didn't give up. She kept on. She would come out with us. You know, we were in this group, which we call Daily Blessings. And I think Chin Chin was our blessing. She would go on us with trip. When we went, you know, we went to Ipoh, we went to Cameron, what was it, Cameron? Fraser's Hill, whatever it is. And Luang Prabang, all the way to Luang Prabang, she went with us. And she would do everything that we did. A bit slower maybe, but she did everything. And she just said, don't worry about me, I'll be all right, you know. She joined in everything. Every year, we have, Chin was born in July 1956. I was born in July 1956. And we have another member of the group, Su Chong, who was also born in July 1956. So we used to celebrate our birthdays together. For the last more than 10 years, we have been celebrating. And the three of us were called Chin, Chang, and Chong. So we celebrated the Chin, Chang, Chong birthdays every year, you know. So anyway, so Chin said, and how did she do this? She was put on all kinds of medication. She herself decided which medication helped her, which medication didn't help. She actually came off all the medications in the end. You know, this is supposed to be for your pain, this is supposed to be for your whatever weakness. She said, look, it's not helping me. I'm going to do yoga. So she ended up in the last years of her life, many years, I don't know how many years, not since COVID, doing yoga. And she was a very diligent practitioner. I joined her in September 2024. And actually, when I was too lazy, I became her driver. And when I was too lazy to go out, I must pick Chin Chin up, so I better get up, you know. So she was actually not just my motivation to go for yoga, but also an inspiration. Because I said, Chin, I can't do this lah. Difficult lah. She said, Chang, if I can do it, you can do it, okay? Look at me, okay? So she was really an inspiration, not just to me, but to other members of the class. And she was really diligent and persevering, right? So anyway, I think my 10 minutes up. So I think Chin Chin is really a special person. In the end, the lymphoma, I must just say a little bit about the lymphoma at the end. She was actually ill for about 6 months before she passed. And she was trying to figure out, we had these conversations, I did this and it's not that, and it's, you know, is it this or is it that? And I went to see the doctor and I discussed this, and she knew everything about her illnesses and she was in control all the time, you know. And in the end, nobody thought about lymphoma because another disease, another illness to attack a rich Lim Chin Chin. You know, she was really, you know. But anyway, nobody thought about it because all other diagnoses, even when she was admitted to hospital in the end, the working diagnosis was something different. And even when they saw the lymphoma cells, they were not sure whether it was that or not, and they had to do all kinds of tests, and that delayed the diagnosis even right to the end, until it was actually she became too ill to undergo any treatment for lymphoma. So that's how we lost Lim Chin Chin, and but you know, we still all remember her, and yeah, I miss her.
Thank you very much. Yes, we all do miss her. And since her blindness was mentioned, she did not like being blind. I don't think anybody does. Which is why she really didn't want to let it get the better of her. She was still able to use WhatsApp and play wordscapes on her phone, even in a hospital bed with a magnifying glass. That's how much she persevered on, even with reduced vision. She tried to learn how to use the cane that blind people use. And that actually brought to light how few Malaysians know what that cane is. Because she would complain that when she brings it out, almost, 1 out of 5 times, someone would walk right in front of her and trip on that cane and fall. So she says, Malaysians just don't know what this cane is. And I'm blessed to know what it is and to be able to respect it. And I hope, everyone here will also be able to take notice of this, why there are raised strips on the ground at every rapid KL station and such, so that, the blind people can feel more respected. So, living and guiding mom along when we go out for walks taught me a lot about how, the blind live and how they had to react to this very, very adversarial world where a lot of our disabled-friendly spots contain a slope that is this steep. I don't know how a wheelchair goes up this kind of slope without falling down. The next speaker is none other than the husband of the late Lim Chin Chin, my father, and the author of the book, Dave Anthony.
When Chin Chin was a student in Form 6, she saw little relevance of what she had to study to what was going on in society, like poverty and unequal opportunities. What keeps the poor people poor, however hard they work? Despite their struggle, they can hardly make a living. How much of it was caused by personal failures, and how much by structures that oppress? These questions set in motion within her a moral and intellectual compass that steered her into a lifelong commitment to social justice that culminated in her embracing liberation theology in her subsequent social work. This total commitment to embodying the principles of liberation theology in all her activism led directly to her detention under the Internal Security Act, the ISA, in Operation Lalang on 27th of October 1987. For pursuing social justice, she paid the price of arrest, detention, and torture. Her work was so impactful that she was later identified by activists as an unsung Malaysian hero or heroine who bravely spoke truth to power. Now, I was contemplating writing a book on her. I was married to Theressa Lim Chin Chin for 38 years, although I had known her for 50 years. After her passing on 20th of July 2025, I came across a piece of writing by her telling her side of the story 18 years after detention, written in 2005. She called it her historical journal. She herself narrates how events unfolded in detention. She had a very good memory. So remarkable that she could remember the small details after so many years. Perhaps it was because they were so painfully drummed into her memory. For Chin Chin, Operation Lalang was the most devastating episode of her life. She never really got over the trauma. She never spoke about what she wrote. It was a discovery. She was not one who would seek publicity for herself. So, should I respect her wishes and not write about her? She has left behind a legacy so precious that it would be a neglect to preserve it under a bushel and not let the world know about it. So I prepared this book on Theressa Lim Chin Chin. You will notice the double-barreled authorship of this book. It is based on two journals fused together. I started writing my own journal on the day she was arrested to the day she was released. It was 237 foolscap handwritten pages. It was mainly about me and the ordeal we both went through together, in spite of the fact that she was in detention and I was out in the world. In my journal, I was talking to Chin, like I was writing a letter to her. When she was in Kamunting, she was allowed to write letters. She wrote a total of 53 letters, but I received only 51. Most of them were censored and some were held back. There was interaction between her letters and my replies to her. Then I could piece together my journal and her journal of reflection and sync them together in the book. There are other voices also in the book. Chin's sister Elizabeth wrote her memories of Chin's early life. Our sons Daniel and Joel also wrote their perspectives of their mother. There are also tributes from her friends. The book is a combined effort from all of us. I put it all together in one. After Chin's passing, we had a celebration of life for her without her remains, because she had pledged her body to the Silent Mentor Program for the advancement of medical science. That program is in session right now. Her body has been in deep freeze for the last 9 months. Last Wednesday, we were able to see her face for one last time. Tomorrow, we will have the gratitude and sending off ceremony when the cremation will take place, after which her ashes will be cast to sea according to her wish. For the celebration of life, in short notice, we had an unexpected turn-up of more than 150 people. We did a write-up of that event with a great number of tributes from her numerous friends. I did not include all this in the book, lest it became too bulky. So I have provided a link and a QR code through which you can access it. Now, our life together was much more than that dreadful 7 months of Operation Lalang. After her release, we turned the page and she changed her career. We lived a very happy family life with our sons Daniel and Joel. She was enchanted to be able to visit, spend time, and pour out her love on her 2 grandsons, Luke and Liam, who are here with us today with their parents. This happy story in the book is illustrated with pictures. Chin Chin never lost sight of her original compass. She worked with the same goal and objectives with women's organizations. In the back cover, you will find a quote from Chang Tian Chua, the former Batu MP. He says, Chin Chin's sacrifices had paved the way for today's movements. Her unwavering spirit will continue to inspire us forward. Her legacy lives on in our hearts as well as in the fight for justice. Thank you, Tian Chua. For Chin Chin, having endured the whole process, adds a caveat in her journal. and I quote, "The choice to be deeply involved should never be made lightly because there are serious and heavy penalties, particularly in authoritarian regimes. Activist or not, young or old, we should never romanticize the accompanying risks that are concomitant in being involved with people and in challenging power structures. Those planning to be involved must be helped to be prepared for this as much as possible to minimize the impact on their lives and psyche." End of quote. Chin Chin lived an eventful life of contribution to society with a deep conviction of social justice until it was cut short by physical disabilities brought all too soon to an abrupt end. Chin became afflicted with a number of extremely rare and incurable ailments. This was the second devastating blow in her life. Her life became a painful journey. She was no longer a vibrant self. She did not complain. She lived a simple life and touched the hearts of countless people who came to know her. Chin was close to nature. In the mornings, she would talk to her plants and flowers, especially to her pink hibiscus. A small bud emerges from the plant. It develops and blossoms into a bright and colorful flower, beautiful to behold. It wrinkles, fades, detaches from the parent plant and falls to the earth and becomes part of it. It is nature that has embraced Chin Chin's being, and we will try to learn to recognize the beauty of her life reflected in the positive forces of Mother Nature. I will end with an ode I wrote to her in the book. Home is where the heart is. My heartthrob is no longer there. Everything in-house reminds me of her, and it has come to this. "Dave, I am dying," to me she did utter. "Chin, think of living," but she knew better. "Just hang in there, Chin. We'll get through this together and go home. We'll be together again. It'll be awesome." She could not see or speak. Could she hear the words we spake into her ear? Painful to see her suffer so, a momentary peace in her final breath, agonizing to let her go, she is no more. A life of activism brought to an abrupt end, only images and memories fond, the only realism. She was my anchor, now I am adrift, unable to hold her without my priceless gift. Thank you for sharing your sweet life. Your illness robbed me of a loving wife. The book on your death I am closing. The book on your life I am opening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to share a few words. Okay. First, I want to actually just see a show of hands. How many of you knew Lim Chin Chin personally? Okay. I'd like to know how many of you knew her as Madam Lim? No, okay. Theresa? Okay, a few. Chin Chin? Okay. Now you see, there's a sort of like a bit of a gap. Some of you knew her by some name, some of you knew her as another, and that is because Mum is somebody who seldom cared about the spotlight, and that's a very rare species today. She taught me many, many things in life. She taught me how to ride a bicycle, she taught me how to solve algebra, she taught me how to bake, and a few other things as well. But today I want to talk about what I learned following her passing, which is the meaning of activism. I think we take some words that are in our dictionaries today for granted. You know, we think we know the meaning of a lot of words. But sometimes these things require a sort of experience, a sort of like exposure to really understand what it means. Because my mother is someone who showed me the meaning of selflessness. See, I grew up in a very different time from both my parents. Now, though we both witnessed the advent of the internet together, it's very different when growing up with the internet, you see? So, the social media has shaped entire generations, not just my generation, but the generations before and after it, some for better, some for worse. But social media and the internet catalyzed this new generation of something that I'd refer to as pretty much false activism. This manifests in the form of, you may have heard this term, keyboard warriors. Now these people, a lot of them fixate very hard on the destructive and demeaning forms of upholding causes and activism. And some of this comes across in this new terminology called cancel culture. Now, internet activists often get lost in this euphoria of mob justice. And it is this cloud that causes them to lose sight towards building towards ideals. Instead, what we end up with seeing are echo chambers. And this practice is often called selectivism. It is a force that's very, very dangerous, very, it's able to, the term I'm looking for is actually, sort of like infectious. It can hijack, it's contagious, it can hijack even the most noble causes of activism. Because at the end of the day, it's actually a form of convenience activism. It's because this kind of internet activism stems from trends. Trends where it's cool to go and be an activist. Because it makes you look intelligent. It makes you look like you're concerned about what's happening in the world. It makes you look like you care. And that's what a lot of people are after. The image, looking like you care. But looking like you care is not the same as actually caring. It's just merely a lot of people looking out for things and asking what's in it for themselves, not for what is in it for the people they're fighting for, the causes and that, but what's in it for themselves. Now, as I grew up, I'm going to be the first to admit, I got caught up in this. I got very caught up in this realm. Once again, it's because I took for granted what it means to be an activist. I thought I knew it. See? Now, on one hand, I was riding this euphoria of feeling like I was a quote-unquote useful member of society because, I associated myself with what I thought were just causes. But then I learned that just mere association with occasional preaching to the choir, that's nothing more than selectivism. And we see this selectivism all over the place in many outlets today. You see social media accounts that believe by putting a few flags after their username is going to somehow make a difference. But then you also see the more, dangerous side of this, where malicious individuals try to bend the definition of certain causes to benefit themselves or to make their so-called activism easier. Now, this was highly catalyzed by the COVID pandemic. It caused irreversible damage to our society, and that goes far beyond the destruction caused by the virus. The spirit that was once held in activism, that we need all the help we can get, this had been corrupted by selectivism because it then took into consideration a lot of non-efforts, a lot of, meaningless symbolism out there. It brought about fair weather activists, and they came to the front line. But these so-called fair weather activists also abandoned their cause the moment things turned adversarial. Now you see, before the first birthday rallies that called for free and fair elections, before they became these bustling demonstrations that had, these enjoyable street party vibes with music and excitement, both mum and dad were at the very first birthday rally. This was one that did not have all of these cool, trendy things. Instead, they got tear gassed and got fired at by water cannons. It was during these rallies that we also saw activists who were being fired at by tear gas and water cannons sit down on the road and turn the other cheek. And this is a meaning of activism that is rare, hard to find today. Now, I don't expect mum to sit down and take a water cannon to the face, but I understand that this is the kind of activism that was the same kind of activism she upheld when she was arrested during Operation Lala. My friends, none of us in this room nor outside are immune to propaganda. That's why conscientization, which is a part of liberation theology, is an invaluable tool. In the age where we outsource our thinking to machines and computers, we have to remember how to make the right decisions, and not just that, we have to understand why we do what we do. For right now, this vacuum of rationality is where we allow injustice to win and permeate our society. Because activism doesn't come with a textbook. It doesn't come with an instruction manual. Yes, this book will go on to become a great text for what it means to be an activist. But it is not, by and large, the manual or, the scripture of what it means to be an activist. Mum's story, especially in the way information was handled during her detention, it reminds us to be wary of those who attempt to dictate what it means to be an activist, and to oppose those who attempt to enforce the words of such false prophets. Because the enemies of justice, the corrupt, the greedy, they will always find their way to survive. We must never ever allow our spirit to be usurped or hijacked by any of them. Because it is through learning about Mum's life before I was born that the meaning of a true activist was really revealed to me. Activism is about the cause. It is about putting a cause above yourself. It is very rarely about an individual. This is why it is to no surprise that we actually know Chin Chin by so many names. That name was merely an identifier, something to refer to her as. The causes, the ideals, and the justice that she lived in pursuit of, those were what came before her. Now, even as she ventured from activism into the corporate world, she brought along many of the values she believed in. But those who are obsessed with the image of activism, they would probably be very quick to brand Chin Chin a traitor to liberation theology, a traitor to liberation in general. Why? Why did you become a cog in the capitalist system that drives this corporate world, that drives this greedy, evil world? But Mum herself, she struggled with the transition, and that is because she never lost sight of justice. In fact, she was versatile. Her versatility allowed her to cut through jargon, protocol, procedures, and find meaning, to eventually climb that corporate ladder. She gave me the life I now enjoy today, all without losing sight of the justice she believes so strongly in. An example I like to quote is that she became a mentor to many, like her late niece, Jennifer. Mum was Jennifer's mentor in helping her find a footing in an IT career, to help her take up the study, and when Jennifer was then struck later in her life with a cruel blow that was breast cancer, she also turned to Mum for spiritual guidance on how to deal with the illness. Jennifer sadly passed away 1 month before Mum did. In the chaos of the world today, I wish I had Mum's guidance. I wish I had her advice, especially in my future career. Once again, this is where her spirit and her activism shines the brightest. As the world charges into the fourth industrial revolution, activists like Chin Chin simply cannot and never will be replaced by a machine or any form of artificial intelligence. Even right now, one would say Chin Chin is actually hard at work. As Dad mentioned just now, she's across the road at University Malaya, having pledged her body to the Silent Mentor program. She was initiated as the 183rd Silent Mentor in this program. Throughout the last 3 days and up until tonight, students from various disciplines in the University Malaya Faculty of Medicine will practice various surgical procedures on her cadaver. They will hone the skills that they will then bring into the practice of saving lives. In fact, just this week, we consented to further studies on Chin Chin's body, including experimental treatments in knee and ENT surgical procedures, which could play a part in the betterment of medicine and the discovery and invention of new forms of treatment. In this world, where trillions and trillions of dollars in investment and capital are poured into weapons of genocide and murder, Chin Chin's humble donation goes beyond what the richest of the world can buy, and it truly moves the needle in more ways than one towards saving and preserving lives. I really hope Mum's story, Chin Chin's story, and the book inspires you and reminds us all about the meaning of activism. This book definitely is not the most pleasant to read, but that is not an excuse to forget about what happened and that to also pretend that the events mentioned in this book did not happen. Thank you very much for coming. I'd like to now pass the time to my brother, Joel Anthony, to say a few words.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming to today. When my dad initially asked me to come in and speak about my mom, I really didn't know what to say. You've heard many other speeches before me, so she was obviously an incredible woman, and putting that in words is just difficult. Even thinking about her sometimes now that she's gone is quite difficult for me. What I decided to do was to read sections of a book that I've already written a tribute to. It's not the whole thing, it's just sections of it, so I'll keep it nice and short. And yeah. My mom lived a simple life that touched many. Some knew her as a fighter and activist, others as a mentor or source of wisdom and advice. Quite a number knew her as a valuable friend, sharing countless laughs and experiences. However, I see her through a unique lens as my mom. Words alone cannot do justice to her life and the impact she had on those around her. Still, I hope that by sharing my reflections as her son, you might glimpse the side of her that made her such a wonderful mother. Ever since I can remember, I always looked forward to welcoming Mum home from work. In the evenings, as the sun began to set, I would position my little self by the door, waiting for her car to pull up into the driveway. I can still recall the excitement of finally seeing her, basking in her embrace and telling her all about my day. Despite whatever challenges she faced at work or at life, she never failed to set them aside and return my greeting with the same enthusiasm. Now that I have children of my own, I understand that feeling better. The love between a parent and a child, especially at that age, is simple and unconditional. A child's love isn't expressed through words or grand gestures, but through the purity of their actions and the trust they place in you. My mom's love had that same sincerity throughout my life. She rarely said the words, "I love you," because she didn't need to, she just knew it. One of her favorite sayings was, "Talk is cheap," something I still remind myself of today, especially before I open my mouth. Skipping to another part. At 19, I moved overseas to university in Australia, and unbeknownst to me at the time, I would never live with my mom again. We stayed in close contact over the years, through regular video calls and annual visits, except during COVID when the world seemed to stop turning. As she aged, my mom's health deteriorated. Each time I saw her, she seemed a little older, slower, and weaker. The most debilitating of her conditions was her fading eyesight. She once told me that her world was getting darker, and she feared the day she would be plunged into complete darkness. Watching her give up her favorite pastime of reading and seeing her become hesitant to leave the house was heartbreaking. Over the years, I struggled with whether I should return to Malaysia to fulfill my filial duties and be there for Mum. Yet she never pressured me to do so. In fact, she told me to do the opposite. She reminded me to stay in Australia if it meant building the best life I could, convinced it was the land of great opportunity. It was comforting to know that my dad and my brother were there to help her, but the guilt has never left me. As time passed, I got married and started a family of my own. This gave Mum the title of grandmother, a role she took on with immense pride. She doted on her grandsons Luke and Liam, and though they were only young, they loved her deeply. Mum often told me that the boys gave her something new to look forward to in life. Though she didn't see them often, she made the most of every visit. She used a magnifying glass to read them books, children's books, sang songs, watched them play, and loved them simply for who they are. She showed them patience. She showed them a patience and a gentle tone that I never knew existed. When she wasn't with them, she cherished every message, photo, and video we sent. Her phone wallpaper and home were filled with pictures of them. This is the last part of my excerpt. Death is such a foreign concept to little ones. The boys still ask if grandma is still sick in the hospital, and if not, where is she now? They wonder where heaven is and when she'll visit again. Her memory will live on through the photos, stories, and love she left behind. I'm grateful she got to meet and know her grandsons, even for a short time. No one would have blamed Mum if she had chosen to sit at home, miserable and angry at the world for the hand she'd been dealt. But that wasn't her. She had the strongest and most resilient mind I've ever known. Despite all she endured physically, she never lost her positivity. She never stopped smiling, even when she could no longer see. She made the long journeys to Australia whenever she could, despite the toll it took on her. She showed me that while we can't always control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. Thank you, Mum, for being a living role model and for teaching me how to love, not through words, but through actions. May you rest in peace.
Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to invite Professor Terence Gomez for the launch of Theresa Lim Chin Chin's book.
let anybody wants to take photos? Emma? There you go. All purchases of Theresa Lim Chin Chin, Liberation Theology, Operation Lalang, and The Price of Pursuing Justice here at Gerak Budaya will be accompanied by a complimentary copy of Yeshua Ecce Homo by Dave Anthony. This is not a mere free gift, but a way to better understand the struggles endured by Chin Chin, her motivations, and a spiritual perspective. I'd now like to invite Dave Anthony to share a few words about this book and its contents.
I think you heard enough of speeches for this morning. Yes, this particular book is called Yeshua Ecce Homo. Yeshua is the true Aramaic name for Jesus. Yeshua. In Chinese, he is Yesu. In Tamil, he is Yesu. In Arabic, he is Isa. Only in English, we call him Jesus. Anyway, this book is a different aspect and perspective of Jesus. But for Chin Chin, Jesus was her role model. She followed in his footsteps, looked upon him as a liberator, and modeled her life and principles after him. Enough said. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Today, in conjunction with the launch of the book, this book will be sold at a 20% discount. We'll be yeah, don't worry, it's not affected by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. We will have a book signing session downstairs at the bookshop. Before we go, some acknowledgements to Claire and Kumar for the delicious food outside, to Pak Chong and Gerak Budaya for allowing us to use this venue, to the Gerak Budaya team for working closely with us on putting the book together, especially with the handling of images. Now, a lot of images were actually kept and catalogued by Chin Chin herself in her iPad. So we managed to recover so many pictures of her life. She kept the most organized photo collection in the whole family. To our speakers, to Terence, Dr. Kwa, Dr. Mary, Dave, and Joel. To everyone here, thank you very much for coming to the team, the AV team, and also all of you watching on YouTube and Facebook. Before we close for the day, we'd like to open the floor for question and answer sessions. Yeah, just a question and answers. Quick session. Any question and answers for any of our speakers?
If I don't have a question and answer, is it okay?
You don't have a question or you don't have an answer?
I had a music presentation.
Sorry? Or if anyone wants to share anything also, yes, by all means. Any memories with Chin Chin? Sure, take your time, Yeah.
I just want to, all right?
While he's preparing, anybody else?
No. I just want to introduce Theressa. Because she's teaching me about liberation theology. I think Theressa like this version.
Yeah. I'm sure she would.
Go ahead. Now, my comrades. Yeah, my comrades.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to say how much Chin Chin meant to me. In 1983 to 87, I was working at the Star, and then just before, a few months before Operation Lalang, my husband and I took our 6-month-old son to work in Brunei. I might have been one of the Operation Lalang detainees if I had not moved to Brunei. And what really touched me was when during her interrogation, when the SB asked Chin Chin, so why did Pek Leng go to Brunei? Her answer was to make money. What else? Right? Which is true. We went there to make money, but it sort of saved me from being parted from my 6-month-old son for God knows how long. And Chin Chin, you know, although I'm totally anti-religion, she is still a good friend and someone I totally respect.
Well, I didn't know Brunei offered asylum from ISA. Because when Irene Xavier was in Singapore, they still managed to grab her.
Hello everyone, my name is Kaiser. I have never known Chin Chin personally, but I am the program organizer for the Women's March for the past 4 years, and I think the two of us are the youngest in this room. And I just wanted to thank everyone for coming together and making this moment a really enlightening moment for the younger generation by making us feel less disconnected from our intergenerational struggles, the solidarity that came, because I think as a younger generation, fighting for liberation in this country, it can often feel very isolating, and we are very estranged from ancestral memory. And I think coming to this session today with my friend and then with my peers here, that it gave a hope that was very needed that I will bring back to my community spaces and our movements. And thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Chin Chin.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yep.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry, I'm a bit lost for words. Chin Chin was in Awam for a long time, and when I knew her actually from the Christian Workers Association period, and today I'm still with Awam. And Cecilia Ng, Dr. Cecilia Ng, also one of the founding members of Awam 40 years ago, and of course Chin Chin still, Cecilia still as a member in Awam, and when Daniel spoke about the activism, I have a lot of reflection, annoyance, frustration, because it's true that now, from the earliest period, the founding members in 40 years ago, we talked about the belief that we want to uphold. We wanted to make the world a better place, to make changes through the legal reform. But unfortunately, today's at some of the things that Daniel shared, activism was a word of the past. And it's not a trend. And people start to call themselves advocates and also maybe consultants. Nothing wrong with that. But the true spirit of what he has mentioned and what Chin Chin demonstrated and many others, earliest activists, women activists displayed in that period was something that never ever left my feeling. And I felt that spirit right in this room when you guys shared about it. And I felt the frustration because I couldn't hold it anymore in my organization when there are so diverse opinions. And also just few days ago, people said, oh, these people were, some of these people were caught. Remember the 3 young men who were holding up Azambagi? Then we were asking, shall we endorse the statement? For me, of course, it's without question. But unfortunately, there were some queries in the group among ourselves. And to me, things like that is uncompromising. It should be, of course, immediately endorsed. I'm sorry I spoke with this emotion because what Chin Chin has done and many others, Cecilia, Heng Ling, these people who were being detained during that period, Operation Lalang has never been one of the incidents I always related to the younger generation within Awam and within the network. Together with some of the older generation insisted in Islam, we talk about it. We talk about the activism. We talk about that time and night that we never question about, oh, it's Sunday. Sorry, I don't work on Sunday. I don't do work. We never question that when it is being a call. And today I have members in Awam in the earliest women movement, Mano, Hanisan, and also Anna and Chin Chin. All right, and these were the earliest and then the mid-period in the women's movement. And we walk together and we shall continue to walk. And I hope many of you who are here, you know, and join us not only in the social movement, because women gender issue has always been an issue that always been neglected. When you call for, you organize a talk about women issue or gender issue, you will see only mostly men and women. You don't see men a lot. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to share this. Thank you very much.
I think everybody wants to make the world a better place, but activism is when you want to make the world a better place, not just for yourself, but for many, many more people around you. I think that's what separates it. I think everybody wants to make the world a better place, even a certain world leader who thinks he's Jesus.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I lost my voice because of the heat. My name is Adrian, and I come from the Catholic student movement background. In 2005, when I graduated, I had this choice whether to join the corporate world or the civil society. And my chaplain, Father Jojo, he sent me to meet Chin Chin. I remember Judith and also Mano in Awam and other organizations. And when I got my first dose of what feminism meant, what patriarchy was, and how to dismantle it. So when I was listening to her and knowing that she was a victim of this Ops Lalang, helping me in the conscientization process, one thing that was surprising was she never exposed that anger in that Ops Lalang in our formation. She was very focused on the issue, on the topic and the theme. So for me, I was very curious why, with whatever the deep state did to her, she didn't dwell into that. Instead, in all her gentleness and her compassion, she made sure me and my team understood the issue very well. Until today, I'm very grateful that and happy that I made the choice. Not that I have anything against the corporate world or capitalism. Actually, I do, but I went into the human rights movement, and now I run my own NGO. So, to the family, thanks for the inspiration. I will always be grateful and indebted to the family. If there's any way I can be of help, do let me know. My second and last point is about what Uncle Sun said about the deep state. The deep state is real and it's terrible. Let's not wait for it to further cause destruction to the nation and to civil society. We have to put an end to it. I don't know how. We ourselves were stopped from registering our NGO for many years by this deep state, and it would never give us a reason, and that had held us back from doing so many good things in terms of social justice. So let's, like what was said, let's come together, talk about these topics, and and look for solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think on the topic of whatever you can do for us in return for what Chin Chin has given, I don't think that's how she would have wanted it. By starting an NGO, I believe she would have wanted all of us to pay it forward. Okay? We're not owed anything for what Chin Chin has done. She wanted to do it for the benefit of everybody, and I think, yes, by paying it forward, that is how we propagate her activism. Any more questions or anything anybody want to add?
Hi, I'm Jaya. I met Chin Chin a few times. I think first started with Asian Women Research Center, Ting Jin, the first person when I met when I'm a Christian girl, still a Christian. And I question a lot of things because I journeyed in church, Tamil Methodist Church. And during my questioning of faith, questioning about things happening in church, I was pointed to people that I met, and some of them are still here, Judith and Nilofer. I forgot you. Bernie. So in this journey, I met Chin Chin few times. I never remember having a long conversation with her, but what I remember her is she never had anger. You know, I never saw her as an angry person. She always had a smile, and even when I went into yoga, you know, I saw her. That's the first time I saw her that she had pain. You know, and sitting here today, listen to all of you and also her children, I'm reflecting in the sense how I'm going to have any, how to say, I won't say influence or something impact, teach my son. You know, because I've been in this the work of NGO, and there are times I've also been questioned, am I an activist or advocate? Because I always try to balance the time with the family. And activism is different for every of us, you know, and time with the family is also important, because growing up in a family where my father was very involved in politics, I learned how much I miss my father at home. So I decided when I become a mother, I want to be vocal in issues of human rights, but I also want to be a mother for my child. So Chin Chin's story was very inspiring, lot of things to digest. And I'm also happy to be here to see so many familiar faces that journeyed with me since I was a young woman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Oh, no. You have to pay. My very important, is it loud enough? Actually, my voice is louder than mine. That's because I blow harmonica. Okay, I blow for 60 years. I'm 70 years old next month. My important question I want to ask is, shall I ask who? I'll ask Uncle Pak Chong. How much is the cost of this book? Nah, forget about it. Now, I am a person, just came out from the hole. I am a self-activist in Facebook. You can Google Alfred Tong. You know, I've got 11,000 posts, I've got 5,000 more followers, but I'm fighting for myself. Now, I always question myself when I came back to be a Christian. Term B. Term A, 3 years. Term B, 20 years. The Lord has opened my eyes and I've had an encounter with the Holy Spirit, and I'm brought back to worship Jesus. I'm studying the theology for some time. I question, what is the role of Christianity? What is the role of Christians in Malaysia? You know, in changing the world. Jesus came to change the world. Karl Marx came to change the world. But I also want to change the world. But somehow or other, I was in the Facebook, in the social media. But of course, I've read most of Brother Kwak Kee Seong's book. I have your full collection. Brother Gomez and many of you. I Pak Chong book, Garak Budaya book. I wallop so many. But now on a storeroom. So from all this reading, of course, I've heard about him, sister there. It is causing my mind to explode right now. Therefore, I can't not speak out my voice. Even though you have special branch here, I don't care a damn. I just want to put a question. How much, maybe it's the wrong question, how much of activism has a, sorry to use the word, true Christian? But actually, if a Christian is true, like Christian is no false one. But unfortunately, in this environment, we have to ask the true Christians, how true are you to the calling of God? But one of them was, I'm still studying, is liberation theology. Hallelujah, amen.
Is your question directed at any one of our speakers?
They know my question very well. Thank you very much.
So do you want them to answer or how?
Up to them.
Oh, okay.
You can touch on the subject, whatever it is. Is liberation theology helping us for Malaysia to fight justice?
Anybody like to provide an answer?
Yeah, maybe I want you to comment about the Christian movement in Malaysia. How are they engendering, consciousness? Oh yeah, of course. You must bring serious questions to them.
If you want to understand, the impact of liberation theology, go back in history.
No. Sorry, liberation theory another subject. Christianity at this level that you understand from the Christian leaders, what have they done, to bring some kind of consciousness, like what Jesus was a political activist. Jesus, really, is it similar or not? Or is it silent mouths in the church, we keep silent, we keep praying outside, we suppress ourselves. And this is my opinion. And any of the NCF leader, any of the church leader, even the Pope from medical comment, I also have to ask them, ask him.
Okay, I'll give you an answer. If you want to know what Christianity is all about, well, that's what you asked just now, so I'm just responding to you. If you want to know more about it, read my book, Yeshua. All right? Now, I am today offering my book, Yeshua, as a complimentary copy for the purchase of every book on Isaalim Chinchin. Yes. So, I'm offering that as a complimentary copy.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody. That concludes the launch for today. Thank you very much for coming. We still have some refreshments outside. Do help yourselves. And once again, we will have a book signing session downstairs at the bookshop. My name is Daniel Anthony. Thank you for being here and have a wonderful Saturday.